Good morning. I'm Debbie Capazzo, member of the TUUC Board of Trustees, and I want to welcome everyone, no matter where in this wonderful world you're joining us from. We welcome all who open their hearts to peace and justice. We are a diverse congregation. We honor the inherent worth and dignity of every person and encourage each of you in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We have a few announcements this morning, and we're going to be putting some information in the chat, so keep an eye on that. Following worship this morning, kids and families are invited to join Nancy Slocum for Kids Chapel at 4 o'clock on Sundays. Nancy also hosts a religious exploration program for our middle schoolers. So for either program, please shoot Nancy an email, and her email is in the chat. Then at noon today, there is a Soul Matters drop-in chalice circle, and we'll put a link for that. There it goes in the chat. Beginning this Tuesday, there's a new member webinar series called Deepening Our Alignment with the Movement for Black Lives. There's more information in the e-news and possibly coming up in the chat. This week on Zoom, there are a couple of opportunities to connect with each other, including Poetry for the Soul with Reverend Linda on Wednesday evening, and also next week on Wednesday evening. And you can find links for that event in our e-news. And if you missed copying or seeing the links that went by in the chat, you can find them all in the e-news. So now let us prepare to gather in worship.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be together this bright, sunny morning. Our opening words are by Drew Kennedy. We come to this congregation this morning for many reasons, no doubt. But among them, I would suggest that we come, both children and adults alike, both to explore and to celebrate the wonders which both grace and bedevil our common existence. We come to this church, bound by no creed and united in no single cause, but we come freely, nevertheless, to affirm and to strengthen and to deepen the quality of our lives. It is good to be together this morning.
We now come to the part of our service where we light our chalice. For those of you that have set up a chalice in your own location, this is the time when you'll be able to light yours also. And as Nancy Slocum lights the chalice, you'll find the words in the chat if you don't know them already. We light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and the holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Slocum. I'm the Director of Religious Exploration for Children and Youth here at Tahoma, Unitarian Universalist congregation. This is the time when we invite the children and the young at heart to come forward when we're in our sanctuary, or maybe come closer to your computer screen so you can hear well, as we have our time for all ages. So I'm wondering, how many of you have ever seen a musical? A musical is a play that has lots and lots of songs to help tell the story. Maybe you've gone to a theater and seen one performed on stage, or maybe you've seen one that's been made into a movie. Some of the movies of musicals are made with actors and actresses playing the roles, and sometimes we see them as animated cartoon movies. The Lion King, Moana, Frozen. Perhaps you've seen some of these. I'll bet you may even know some of the songs from these musicals. My granddaughter and I love going to plays and the musicals, and we've been to theaters in Tahoma and Seattle and some musicals there. We've seen musicals based on popular books like Junie B. Jones and Naked Mole Rat Gets Dressed, the musical. They are great entertainment, and they are great ways to bring stories to life. Today, Reverend Lyndon is going to be talking about a musical called Hamilton. Maybe you've heard of it, maybe not. It's geared more for older kids and for adults, but some of you may have seen it already. It's been performed live in theaters for a few years now, and recently it's been filmed so that people can watch it on their televisions at home. So for those who haven't seen Hamilton or don't know the history, I'm going to give a very brief bit of information about what the story is, a little bit about it, just so we're all on the same page. So bear with me if you already know the story. But Hamilton tells the story about a man named Alexander Hamilton, who lived about 250 years ago, back when our country, the United States of America, was not yet a country. Some of you have maybe started learning about American history from your parents or in school. And back in the time of Alexander Hamilton, there were people who had moved to the area that is now the eastern part of the United States. You can ask your parents to show you on a map where this is if you don't know where it is. Many of them came from across the Atlantic Ocean, from Europe, and from England, a country called England. There were other people living in this country at that time too. There were the indigenous people, the Native Americans, who were here when the Europeans came to live here. And there were people who were brought from Africa as slaves. But the story told in the musical Hamilton focuses mostly on the people who came from Europe. These people lived here in North America, but they were being governed or being ruled by England. They didn't yet have states that we have now. Like, we live in Washington State. And there are states back east like Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, Virginia, and New York, and others. And when the Hamilton story starts, though, they were not yet states. The United States of America was not yet a country. But they were colonies, which meant that they didn't make their own decisions about the rules. There was the king in England, King George III, who ruled not just England, but he also ruled these colonies. Not surprisingly, the people who lived in the colonies were not happy that the rules were being made by the crown, the king, as they had no say in what those rules were. And one of those things that they especially didn't like was that England expected the colonists to pay money, to pay taxes to England. And the colonists didn't think that they should have to give their money to England. They wanted to keep their money here. And you may have heard of the Boston Tea Party, where colonists dumped tea off of a ship into Boston Harbor in protest of having to pay these taxes. It just didn't seem fair to them. And as Unitarian Universalists, remember, one of our principles is that we like to ensure that people get to vote on the decisions that affect them. So the story of Hamilton takes place during this time in the history of our country, when the colonists stood up to England and said, "No more. We want to be our own country." And they declared independence. They declared freedom from England. Some colonists wrote a document called the Declaration of Independence. You may have heard of that. It was written and it was signed on July 4th, 1776. And every year on July 4th, our country celebrates the signing of that document. The King of England and others in England were not happy that the colonists were saying, "We want to be independent." And there was actually a war that started over it. A war that we call the American Revolution. So for those of you who maybe are studying history in school, I bet you've heard a lot about this war. You've heard a lot about the fight for independence. It feels like a really important part of our history, the fight to become our own nation. And if you're studying it in school, you'll spend a lot of time learning about the fight for independence. So the musical Hamilton tells a piece of this story, of this time in our country's history. And when the musical came out, it became wildly popular. It was first performed in New York City on Broadway, a place where lots of musicals get their start. And people just loved it. The music was great, it was interesting, and it told about this really important time in our history. And the great thing about musicals is that they can be performed anywhere in many different places. It was performed in Seattle a couple of years ago, so people here had a chance to go see it if you were lucky enough to get tickets. It was so popular that it was very hard to get tickets. It's been performed all over the country. I didn't get to see it when it was here, but I wanted to. I had my chance though. About a year and a half ago, I took a vacation to London, England, the capital city in England. And like New York's Broadway, where lots of musicals and plays are held, lots of theaters there, London has lots and lots and lots of theaters. And part of why I went to London was because I love going to the theater and I wanted to see a lot of plays and musicals when I was there. So before I went, I got online and I looked up tickets and I saw Hamilton was playing there. It's still playing there. It plays there. It's going to be playing there for a long time. But sadly, the tickets were so expensive, I just couldn't imagine paying that kind of money to go to a play. So I thought, I'll just go to some other place while I'm there and I'll see Hamilton another time. Well, when I got to London, I discovered that I could get a ticket for half price. And I thought, here's my chance. I am going to go see Hamilton. I was so excited that I was going to get to see this musical that so many people were raving about. I got to the theater early. It was this beautiful old theater called the Royal Victoria Theater. When I sat down, there was a woman sitting next to me and we got chatting. And it turns out she was from Redmond, Washington, a town just outside of Seattle. We were basically neighbors. Here I am, thousands of miles away from home. And I meet someone who's from my own backyard. Well, when the performance started, I was completely entranced. It has wonderful music and fabulous dancing, and it tells a story that I had been hearing about since I was a little girl. The story of my country's fight for independence. The story of people standing up for themselves and working hard to create a new system of government, a new way to have a country, a new way of being. They weren't going to be a monarchy where they were ruled by a king or queen. They were going to create a government where people have a vote in what happens to them. This is what I learned from the time that I was very young, and I felt a lot of pride watching it as it unfolded on stage. But at some point during the performance, I got this feeling that things weren't as quite as I expected. The woman from Redmond sitting next to me, I felt her energy about this, and I felt this great energy, and this pride in this story of the American Revolution. But I sensed that not everybody in the theater was feeling the same way that I was. They seemed to love the performance, they loved the music, they loved the dancing as much as I did. But I could just sense that they weren't connected to the story in the same way. And I think it might have been during one of the songs. It's a song sung by the character of King George III. And it kind of pokes fun at the king, I thought. It's called They'll Be Back. And he's singing about, oh, these Americans, they're going to fight us, but they'll be back. They're going to want to be part of England again. And of course, we know from history that didn't happen. Our country became independent of England. And we did not go back to England. And the way the song is sung, it's very funny, and it kind of pokes fun at King George. And suddenly it dawned on me that almost everybody in the theater was probably English. The story being acted out on stage wasn't their side of the story. It was telling the Americans' version of the story. The Americans had beaten England in the war. The Americans gained their independence from England. And I wondered what they thought about this song that kind of poked fun at their king. And when the play said negative things about England, I'm wondering how they felt about that. And as I thought about that while watching the play, I realized this was a really good reminder how we all hold our own stories. What I understand to be true or important might be very different from what someone else thinks is true or important. It's part of the reason I love to travel to different places. It gives me a glimpse into the lives of others and into their stories. I also love reading books and watching movies that give me those same glimpses. The more I learn about other people's perspectives, the more I understand about us all. To be honest, I think most people who live in England these days don't really give a whole lot of thought to the American Revolution. In fact, they don't call it the American Revolution. They call it the American War for Independence. They don't study it much in school. It was really just kind of a small piece of their history and one that they just don't learn much about. But as I sat in the theater that day, it gave me a good opportunity to remember how we all have different experiences and to make sure that I always try to be respectful of our different experiences and our different lives. That is our time for all ages. I will send you out with the words that we send you out of the sanctuary with when you are here. On a song that when we form our arch, we sing these words. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your heart be at peace as you go. To nurture the spark of your precious heart, and each and every one of your hearts is so precious to us. We hold you in our love as you go. Thank you.
We come to this place because we love what exists here. The resources of spiritual information, shared knowledge, and caring atmosphere fill us. Our TUUC home is a living entity, as is the Vashon Fellowship. Pardon me. Like all living things, they need sustenance and nurturing. It is us, the members and friends of these spiritual hubs, that give the financial support that's needed to support the building, staff, and activities. Please take a moment to use these links to share your resources with these places that mean so much to all of us. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls.
We pause now for a few moments of quiet and contemplation together. A time to take a few breaths, to listen to words that invite us into deeper reflection. Our words for meditation come from Teresa Enos Soto, from her book, Spilling the Light. Everything is still on fire, despite your best efforts. In addition to living, it is clear that, fire or not, you must level up in what it means to thrive. Right now, that means wrestling with the truth in the fact that everything is not all your fault. I'm sorry that everything is still on fire. Once hate catches, the winds of "not my problem" blow, and the blaze is hard to stop. But hard is not impossible. Not yet is different than never. You, in community, have an answer. You have a response to systems of power and control and to the cost of suffering. You and your community together are the answer. You are not only a people of flame, but also a people of cold, clear truth. You know both where you fall short and where you flourish and where you reach. Everything is still on fire, but all is not lost. You remain more nimble than steadfast, more unshakable than swayed by the latest rage. You are here to put out the ravenous flames and heal the world. Enough is enough. Let us pause in stillness together. So may it be. I'm going to introduce our reading today. Bob is one of the folks who has not yet had a chance to see Hamilton or be quite so caught by its its wonderfulness. There is, as you all know or may know, Disney Plus has had Hamilton on since I think it was the 2nd or 3rd of July. And given a lot of people an opportunity to see this musical, as Nancy said, that has kind of swept the nation. They have also put up a couple of, Disney Plus has also put up a couple of panels of people talking about Hamilton. One of them is called Hamilton, History Has Its Eyes on You, a phrase from one of the songs. And it includes members of the cast, the original cast, and Lin-Manuel Miranda, and also the producer of the show. And it is their conversations about what it means and how it came about and why it's important. They also include a historian who speaks to some of the historical details and some of the historical mistakes that it makes. So here are 2 excerpts from that, spoken in the panel by 2 members of the cast. And I invite Bob now to share those excerpts.
So the first excerpt is Leslie Odom, who is speaking as Aaron Burr. I saw the very first reading of Hamilton mixtape in Poughkeepsie, New York, when they were just starting to get Act 1 up on its feet. So I saw David, I saw Chris, I saw Lynn in this work. I had no idea, sitting in the black box theater, that I would end up in the show. But early in the show, there's a song called The Song of Tonight. And there were 4 men of color on the stage singing about friendship and brotherhood. And I had never seen an image like that in my life. And so to me, that was a revolution. To me, that image alone made the piece worthy. Because an image like that rocks you and can change your life, just seeing it. The second part of this is a reading by Renee Elise Goldsberry, who is playing Angelica Schuyler, I'm so grateful that Lynn had a very specific agenda when it came to telling the story. And I'm glad that he did not have an allegiance to the letter of history he was reading, because you know that itself is flawed. He had an allegiance to inclusion, and inclusion meant not only people of color, but also women who were both powerful and vulnerable. And our job is to go further down the road and really find out who the women of the revolution really were.
Like many of you, perhaps, I was thrilled to see that Disney Plus was going to broadcast a filmed version of the original cast of the Broadway hit Hamilton. For a few years, I had longed to go see it. I had priced tickets at various times, had dreamed of affording the cost of the tickets. Those of you who have looked for them or found them know what I mean. I watched as friends like Nancy saw it and exclaimed how spectacular it was. I was figuring out how the timing of signing on to Disney Plus would work and when I could watch those 2+ hours of the musical. I was seriously out of control, fangirling over the whole thing, listening again to the album of the songs and singing along in my old white lady way to the words. And then I went to the UUA General Assembly, the annual gathering of all of the Unitarian Universalists across the country. And it was all online, but I went, and those of you who heard Arian talk about the General Assembly this year, as I say, all online, part of the focus of the conference was to address the 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims, our religious ancestors, arriving at Plymouth 400 years ago this year. The program included and highlighted Indigenous people and their concerns. And I tuned in to one of the programming slots that was sponsored by Beacon Press, our affiliated publishing house. It featured Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, the author of An Indigenous History of the United States, published by Beacon. Her hour-long lecture was called Settler Colonialism and a History of Erasure and Exclusion. At the very end of her excellent lecture, she said, "We need to ask ourselves why, in the early 21st century, an invented hagiography, history of a saint, an invented hagiography of a founding father, the architect of US capitalism, Alexander Hamilton, was so enthusiastically embraced by liberals. The Broadway musical," she said, "employing Black and Puerto Rican actors playing white founding fathers, most of whom were slave owners or speculators in the slave trade. While no slaves themselves appeared in the script, created near hysteria and ecstasy among young people, white, Black, and especially immigrants, and is being played and taught in K-12 schools. It is a cruel deception we need to think deeply about." Her new book, coming out in 2021, is Not a Nation of Immigrants: Settler Colonialism, White Supremacy, and a History of Exclusion and Erasure. I believe I actually swore aloud as I clicked away from the lecture, feeling confused and angry that something I had been so happy about seeing was now forever tainted. Great, I thought to myself, there's another thing ruined. Now, it's not the first time that's happened to me. As I expand my understanding of what it means to be a person of faith in this time, I stumble and sometimes run fast into hard truths about our history as a country and as a faith movement, not to mention finding out those hard truths about my own history. Some of you will remember that I discovered a few years ago that I am descended from slave owners and also from Southern bankers who helped support and slavery in its time. History and its impact is so complicated, so complicated. I think there's a longing in most of us for the stories we tell about ourselves and our lives and the place where we live to be simple, just simple stories. Human beings overall, I think, gravitate toward basic narrative lines. This happened, and then that happened, and then this happened. One event leading on to another without spreading storylines and diverging narratives. And we like being the heroes of our stories, the ones who get it right. But when we're honest, we know better. Motives are rarely pure, understandings are never global, and our hunger for being right is unending. We do try to do what is aligned with our deep values, and yet we stumble. We try to live into our best intentions and still make a mess without meaning to. Our words that we speak in love sometimes wound. And when we're paying attention, we live within that tension all the time. It's our curse and our blessing both, I think, that there is very little that is completely pure in our world. This is especially true when it comes to human stories and histories. We love, for example, the words of the Declaration of Independence and the possibility that we might eventually live into the promise of all people being created equal, deserving of liberty and life and the pursuit of happiness. We believe in that even while knowing that Thomas Jefferson enslaved more than 600 people in his lifetime, including his own children. I have to tell you, I wrestled with this at all the days after the General Assembly. Watch this or not? Support this or not? Well, I admit to you that I did get Disney Plus and have watched Hamilton all the way through now 3 times, each time finding something new to love and to appreciate about it. I have loved musicals my whole life, and there are things to love in this one, while acknowledging and being aware of its limitations. As we heard in the reading that Bob shared from 2 of the actors of the original cast, there are groundbreaking elements in this play. That image of 4 Black men singing of friendship and brotherhood opens vistas of possibility in the world. The artistic license that allowed Lin-Manuel Miranda to center some women of the revolution to lift up their voices and gifts makes it something worthy and good in the world. To subvert expectations by having an entire cast of people of color is powerful, even if the narrative is flawed. The exploration of these stories through the medium of hip hop blasts through another cultural norm and expectation. And along with that, there is serious erasure of the Native people through the play, hiding the harm and loss and terror that goes unnoted, even especially up to this day. It only barely notes the presence of slavery and its deadly consequences and the ongoing impact. So much in our lives is a complicated mess with no clear path to what is good and true and right. And yet, here is the good news. We are called to wrestle with the counter narratives and the deadly truth, to wrestle with the tensions that accompany us through our lives. We are called to be awake and active in understanding and acting upon the best truth we can discern, knowing for sure that we will fail over and over again. You see, we need to strive not for perfection in all of this, but in thoughtfulness and care, for making the change that is yours to make and supporting and loving each other into what we can all become together. I come back as I close out my sermon to Teresa Soto's words, reminding us again that you and your company together are the answer. You are not only a people of flame, but also a people of cold, clear truth. You know both where you fall short and where you flourish, where you still can reach. Everything is still on fire, but not all is lost. You remain more nimble than steadfast, more unshakable than swayed by the latest rage. You are here to put out the ravenous flames and heal the world. Let us wrestle, my friends. Let us seek to find the clearest truth that we can and live it into the world with all our flaws and all our strength and all our beauty. So may it be. Amen. We pause now for a few moments to set an intention. If there's been something in our service today, in the music or the words or the stillness that has touched you, I invite you to take a moment to set an intention for how you will carry it into your life. Let us be in quiet together. So may it be. Our closing words are from Reinhold Niebuhr. Nothing that is worth doing can be achieved in our lifetime. Therefore, we must be saved by hope. Nothing which is true or beautiful or good makes complete sense in any immediate context of history. Therefore, we must be saved by faith. Nothing we do, no matter how virtuous, can be accomplished alone. Therefore, we are saved by love. No virtuous act is quite as virtuous from the standpoint of our friend or foe as it is from our standpoint. Therefore, we must be saved by the final form of love, which is forgiveness. So may it be with us all. Amen.
We now come to the end of our service, and as such, we will say our closing words together, which are in the chat if you don't already know them. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we're together again.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and of this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and of this we live. From you